This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/mapperforward to find out how you can become a member today. Carlos Arcila, welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward. It's wonderful to have you here again, Carlos.
Hi, Lee. No, it's beautiful to be here with you today. Thank you for the invite.
I am really looking forward to this conversation because we are entering very interesting times in the coffee supply chain. The day that we are recording this, we have had some news about some challenging things that are happening in Brazil from a weather perspective, and the sea market has spiked over the last couple of days. So it looks like supply chain could be experiencing a few challenging things. You know, what's new, given the past couple of years. But you are involved in the supply chain end to end out of Colombia. And Colombia has been experiencing its own set of challenges over the last few years with regards to the supply of coffee and getting that coffee to the rest of the world. So I thought this would be a really wonderful time for us to have a conversation, you being somebody who I have a lot of respect for and whose business I am a big fan of and whose ethics as a person I have a high regard for. And so today we are going to, in the next 5 episodes in this series, we are going to talk about the supply chain in Colombia, and we're going to talk about what some of those challenges have been over the past few years, what we project into the future for that and how you see that happening, and in general, what we think some of the challenges for the coffee industry are going to be over the next 10 years.
Fantastic. Well, I'm ready for that. Let's go bit by bit because you put a lot of things together in one sentence.
I did.
One of them takes a bit of time to answer.
So we're going to start with today's episode, which is going to be about understanding what makes the Colombian supply chain different from other origin countries. So why don't you tell us, just remind everybody who Cofinet is, and then we can dive into that question.
Absolutely. Look, so Cofinet is a family-owned business. My brother and I started Cofinet 7 years ago. The initial thought was to be able to ship coffees directly out of our farm to the world. And then we found out that the coffees produced by us were terrible, as many other people we thought were producing great coffees. That's the one thing you see in Colombia, that everyone always believes that they're producing the best coffees in the world. But then when you look into it with a bit of different perspective, you find out that it's not true and that you have to work really hard to make it happen. So we started 7 years ago. My brother went back to Colombia. I stayed in Australia. He took charge of the farms. And since then, we've been in the search for, I would call it the perfect cup, which means we put in a lot of effort. We've been trying really hard with different innovations to be different. And in the meantime, we've created also really sustainable relationships with a lot of farmers that we work today with, that we've been working for the last 5-7 years. Also for associations and cooperatives that work with us. And today we just connect with great people around the world. We make sure we deliver them great coffees, and we've created amazing relationships. And basically that's what we do in a nutshell.
Yeah, awesome. So now let's take a look at what makes Colombia unique as a coffee producing region.
Well, there's many things to add to that point, but I would say probably the first one is that in Colombia, I'm not sure why, but we decided long ago to do the whole thing, which means, for example, if you look at Ethiopia, Costa Rica, many places, Brazil, most of the industry is divided. And what I mean by this is that people will grow coffee, then someone else will process the coffee, then someone else will mill the coffee, then someone else will export it. Mm-hmm. In Colombia, it's very unique and very different. In every single farm, regardless of how big it is, you normally have people that will obviously grow the coffee, then they will go and pick the coffee up, then they will process the coffee up, and then they'll have a little place also to process the coffee and to dry the coffees. So all of that is done at the farm level. Then basically everyone has dry parchment, and that's what we sell to most of the exporters or the mills. But we do all that before in one farm. And in many other places, it's completely different. People just grow coffee and sell cherries, while in Colombia, we go all the way to the processing and drying at the farm level. And when you look at it, it brings a lot of complexities because the average farm in Colombia is probably 3 hectares. And when you think of 3 hectares, the output that you have is very little. People have to live with that. Basically, one family or two families normally rely on that. So when you look at other places, there's big infrastructure to dry, to process coffees. And on the other hand, then you have Colombia where everyone is doing everything at their farms. And with very limited revenue, the setups that they have are exactly the same thing, very limited. So it's very challenging for them to process, to dry coffees, especially drying is probably the biggest challenge we have in Colombia because Colombia is a very wet country, which means almost in all producing regions, we always have a lot of rain. When you have rain while you're processing and picking coffee, that makes it a lot more challenging than anywhere else. Then I guess another big challenge or part of the supply chain in Colombia is that for many years and still now, it used to be 99%. We used to probably produce 99% of our coffees as a wash process. These days it's changed a little bit, but it's still, I would say probably 90% of the coffees that come out of Colombia are still washed. That has been slowly diversifying into naturals and other processing methods, which even bring more complexities because when you dry naturals and honeys, that means you need a lot more space. And again, this is one of the restraints that we have because the processing centers and the drying spaces at the farm are very limited. So that brings another layer of complexity. And then the last one and most important is the challenge internally with the internal transport or the roads that we have are very limited. The investment of the country, of the government in terms of roads, in terms of logistics in Colombia is very limited, which makes even more challenging to move coffees from A to B, from farms to processing centers, from processing centers to mills, and then also extremely challenging to get to the port sometimes, depending on the condition of what's going on in Colombia. You know, lately it hasn't been that stable, so it brings a lot of more complexities into the picture. So yeah, definitely Colombia, it has its own challenges. The other bit that I would mention as well is that we only have two main ports, and one of them moves 80% of the cargo, and also that port is known for not being very reliable. So then you also have the Cartagena, which moves 20 to 30% of the cargo, but that means we only have really two options to ship coffees out. And sometimes these ports can be a bit of a mess, so it makes it even more challenging for us to make sure that we can comply with timeframes, which we've promised to either our own offices or roasters around the world, or even importers that we work with. So in a nutshell, yeah, Colombia is very unique, very different. It has its own challenges, but slowly we're working through it and making sure that still we are the third producing country in the world. And that means we need to get coffees out and we need to make sure that the quality and everything we do is at the level of many roasters around the world.
There's an organization that runs the coffee, all of the way that coffee is, I guess, the FNC, right? They run everything about everything coffee, correct?
Yes, Colombian Federation.
Yeah. So tell me what role they play in, let's say, Cofinet produces coffee. How involved do they get in you being able to export coffee?
Well, they are an entity that supervises the quality that is going out of the country. So, but at the same time, it's very confusing because they also sell coffee to the world, and they're probably the biggest exporter of Colombian coffee in the world. And at the same time, the regulators. So it's very interesting. It's hard to understand because every single...
I see a couple of conflicts there.
Yes, it's very unique. Like I said, Colombia is a unique place. What can we do? But it's absolutely unique because every single kilo we export, we need to put aside a certain amount of money that goes into the contribution of the federation, which is meant to look after the rights and what we want to do as a country for the Colombian coffee, right? And then at the same time, they are regulators, which means they will check the coffee and make sure that it follows a strict criteria to be able to be exported. And then at the same time, they compete with...
They're your competitors.
Yes. So it's, look, what can I say? It's very unique.
It's Colombia.
It is Colombia. That's probably the answer. Yes, absolutely.
The world just never stops getting stranger and stranger and stranger, does it?
Well, it's been like that for a couple of years. When I started Cofinet, I really struggled to understand how that could be in place. But then you learn to live with it, and then you're part of it, and then hope we're all hoping that it is for the benefit of all. And they've been changing slowly. It used to have a lot more critics than today, because the amount of coffee that we used to put aside to contribute to federation was massive 50 or 60 years ago. These days it's a lot smaller, but it's still very significant. Federation has a lot of funds to do many things around the world.
We're going to explore some of the very unique things that Cofinet has done with coffees. But specifically in the next episode, what I want to talk about is, let's dive into some of the challenges that Colombia has been experiencing over the past couple of years, particularly things like, I know that you guys have experienced some flooding, and as well, there have been some issues with regards to supply chain during the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. So let's do that.
Absolutely. Where do you want to start?
We'll come back in the next episode and do it.
Fantastic.
Okay. All right, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.